is there anyone here that's attending this meeting for the first time? This is different from any other Big Book meeting. Let me explain. All right, so I say that this meeting was started out of my own self-will run riot because, you know, when we try to run the show, I'd go to other Big Book meetings and I'm like, oh my, if I ran this Big Book meeting, this is how I do it. So we started this one. Instead of the readings in the beginning like you have in other meetings, we do an overview of the Big Book so you know exactly why we're reading, what we're reading tonight, and how it fits into the first 164 pages of the Big Book, which outlines our program, okay? During the reading, we don't go around the room. There's only one person that reads. That would be me. But during the reading, we encourage crosstalk. So if there's something I say, something you don't get, or a word that you don't understand, just shout it out. Like, what's Armistice Day? What? You know? Or if a phrase, because Bill speaks in a lot of phrases sometimes, okay? So just shout it out and go repeat that. I didn't get it. Or if you have some input. We have a lot of people here with a lot of time that can share their experience with the Big Book as well, okay? So it's kind of like you're sitting on the couch with 60 of your favorite friends. All right? So how many people... Not many people, well, I didn't in the beginning understand. When somebody gave me a big book, I'm like, that's awfully big. I'm not reading it, right? I didn't realize these are stories. This is the 164. The 164, the first portion of this book outlines the program of Alcoholics Anonymous to show you precisely how we have recovered, okay? And that's what we're going to be reading. The stories are very important, okay? They change with each edition. We've had 4 different editions of the Big Book. We've taken stories out in each edition and put some stories in, okay? So if you have this book, Experience, Strength, and Hope, and the 4th edition, you have all the stories and everything written in the Big Book since its beginning. That was an aha moment for me. I was like, what? Running around looking for a 1st edition before the internet. All right? So we're in the 164 pages. It starts off with the preface. In the preface, we say, the first 164 pages, we don't change it. There's a strong sentiment against any radical change being made to it. And we hope that when you read this or read some of the stories that you might go, I felt like that. Wait a minute. This might work for me. The Me Too, right? Way before the Me Too movement. So you got to know whether you're an alcoholic, right, and get that Me Too beforehand. So that's what our hope is, that when you read this and you're searching for an answer, you might get that. And then it has a foreword for each of the 4 editions. The first edition, 1939, very beginning, it says, the main purpose of this book is to show you precisely how we have recovered, okay? So there's clear-cut directions. Now, 90 meetings in 90 days, very good suggestion. It's not one of the clear-cut directions. Those are in the book. There's a lot of good suggestions. They're not the rules. The clear-cut directions would be for the program, okay? In the 2nd edition, 1955, we threw in some history. Then 76 and 2001, it explains how we've grown. All the countries and all the people, you know, that we're helping and some of the changes that were made, okay? Now, the book starts here at the doctor's opinion. Our 2 founders, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, okay? That's not this doctor. This is Dr. Silkworth, okay? We asked him to write the introduction to our book, right? It's kind of like if we went down to Harbor General and we walked into or Detox at Redgate or somewhere, and the doc goes like this. You again. Sorry, we don't have a pill that'll fix you. You've got this allergy that we doctors don't know how to fix, right? You're irritable, restless, and discontent. Emotional appeal doesn't work with you, but whatever these men have to say seems to work. You need basically a spiritual slap on the head. We don't have a pill for that, right? So he describes the allergy. You'll find A, B, and C in there maybe. Oh my gosh, I have that. I'm an alcoholic. No human power. Drinking beyond our human control, he mentions, right? And something outside of themselves has to work. Then, chapter 1 is Bill's story, our first founder. That's where we're going to be reading tonight. So let's say that I just picked up this book and I'm not sure I'm an alcoholic, right? I'm reading, I'm looking at maybe I didn't find me in the doctor's opinion. I might find myself in Bill's story, right? We're halfway through Bill's story, so we'll do a quick review when we start that. There is a solution. It's almost like we're the only ones sober at that time, right? In 1939. There was like 40 to 100 of us, right? And we all kind of chime in and we go, a lot of us felt just like Bill. If you think you're one of those Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the real alcoholic, you might be one of us. Come along for the ride, okay? More about alcoholism. We read it in a meeting, right? It starts off, none of us wanted to admit we were alcoholic, right? And then just like in a participation meeting, we have different members tell their story. Jim the car salesman, Fred the accountant, right? And in there, the jaywalker, you might find something that makes you go, oh my gosh, that's me. Right after that is we agnostics, okay? Along here, you'll hear us talk a lot about a spiritual solution. So most of us have come in going like this. Don't do the God thing with me right now, right? It's a whole chapter dedicated to don't overthink the God thing. You haven't been able to do this by yourself, right? I heard a great speaker the other day. He said, if that was the case, step one would just say, stop. I thought that was hysterical. It says, don't overthink the God thing. You lack that power to do this by yourself, right? Now, if you got a God, good. If you don't worry about it. Come along for the ride. But just don't overthink that. You don't have that power. There's a power bigger than you because you lack that power. Let's get into some steps. That ice cube will melt, okay? How it works, we get into the steps then. It says, remember when we read in a meeting, we'll read the steps and then we read A, B, and C. A, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. No human power, not even me going, I should stop, right? Has been able to get me to stop. C, something other than me is going to have to work. Something bigger than me. God couldn't, what if he were sought? That's the basis for steps 1 and 2. The original manuscript, which is up here if anybody ever wants to look at it, said, if not convinced of A, B, and C, reread the book up until this point or throw it away. But if you are convinced, you're now at step 3. So that means everything up until there, the doctor's opinion, and all this is steps 1 and 2. Because then we get into step 3, right? That page before itself will run riot. My fear, my insecurity, my insanity. What if I can't? Right? And then we do an inventory. Fear, sex, resentments, right? We learn a few facts about ourselves. Up in this first part, we're full of terror. You know? Humiliation, I can't. That quicksand that stretches out all around. I swear when I said I wanted to stop, I meant it, and then 10 minutes later I'm doing it again, right? But after we get through with our steps, then into action, we have a sponsor, we read that 4th step to somebody. Into action is going to go through steps 5 through 11. 5, reading that inventory to somebody. Learning some character defects about ourselves, right? Learning how to clear up the wreckage of our past. And 10 and 11, trying to keep that clean, right? Checking to make sure that we haven't messed anything up while we're trying to clean up this stuff, and we stay spiritually fit in meditation. And then once we've got through that, we've got a new freedom. We're not as selfish. We're thinking to help others, right? Working with others is all about how we introduce ourselves to the newcomer. It doesn't say tell them to shut up and don't talk. It says clearly we don't criticize. We tell a little bit about our story. We ask them to tell a little bit about themselves. We ask if they have a book. We see where we can help. That's all an introduction to sponsorship, okay? To the wives, to the family afterwards, to the employers. The wives will describe some of our progress getting here, the 4 different types of alcoholic, but it's also the introduction to Al-Anon. Family afterwards, just because we got sober and got 30 days doesn't mean we go home and everything's all peachy, right? It's kind of like how we deal with it, but we're not a glum lot. And to the employers, if you got a drunk one of us, give them a book, send them to a meeting, or if you got a drunk one of us coming back, this might be some of the stuff you come across in a vision for you. Sums all of this up, the very last part of it. We read it at the end of a meeting. It's the last, that reading is 164. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. We only had 2 and 3 years sober when we started doing this in 1939. Some of our Bill only had 4 years, right? And wrote a book that for 80 years would change lives. Pretty powerful, huh? But it basically is saying, here's our book, don't die. And then the first story, once we get into the stories, is Dr. Bob. Okay, Dr. Bob's Nightmare. We will read all of this, but tonight we're in Bill's story. Does everybody have a big book? Good idea to have a big book in a big book meeting. We're going to be on page 8, okay? So we read the first half of Bill's story last week, and we're going to finish it up tonight, okay? Now, after the reading, we do the 12 traditions, and then there's a half an hour for sharing. We have till 7:30. If everybody wants to share, it's completely up to you. But during the reading, it's time for like questions, input, and stuff like that, all right? Just because we're being recorded does not mean you don't have to answer a question. You can still ask it. I'll repeat it, and then we'll go on, all right? So let's start at the very beginning of Bill's story, okay? For those of you that weren't here. That first page of Bill's story. I remember when I read this, I was like, whatever, doggerel, I don't know what that is, right? Let's get to the interesting stuff, right? But that first page talks about him going over there. He was a soldier, and he went over there. That was our patriotic song at the time, right? And he stumbles upon a tombstone. Get this, he's a soldier at the age of 22. And he stumbles upon a tombstone of a soldier that died of alcoholism a few years older than him. And he's about to embark on his alcoholism. And it says, ominous warning, dun, 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 which I failed. Ominous is kind of like that music when you know somebody's going to get killed in a movie. It's like, dun, dun, dun. Right. So, ominous warning, which I failed to heed, he says. Right? So he goes back home. How many people have had God shots? Nice. Yeah. Normal people don't usually have those God shots when it comes to like, you might be an alcoholic, but we do. He talks about how he would still his wife's foreboding. You know, the drinking started getting heavy, and he'd still his wife's foreboding. She'd beg him not to go out, and he'd go, ugh, men of great genius had their best ideas drunk. Look at Einstein. I'm okay. I got this, right? He also was going to school to be a lawyer, and then he's like, I didn't want to be a lawyer anyway. Maybe because he was too drunk to pass his classes. But he got into Wall Street and being a stockbroker, right? He had a little bit of success. He talks about fortune threw money his way at one point. And I think we talked about how, oh my God, I got to stop drinking. This is horrible. Everything's just going to, the world's caving in around me, and all of a sudden we got some money in our pocket. And we could buy everybody at the bar a drink. We've got a host of fair weather friends. Now we're like, I don't know, I think I was overreacting. This is not a problem, right? And that's what he did. But his friends terminated in a row. Then he got golf fever. He went after Walter Hagen, which is kind of like substitute Tiger Woods at the time. Drinking took every night. Then the stock market crashed in 1932, right? This is, if any, 32 crash. So, men were jumping off of high buildings because they lost millions. United States, we went through a Great Depression at the time, right? He's like, I'm not going to jump. I'll go over to my friend's house. He's got a lot of money. We'll go live with him. So, has anybody done geographics? Oh, we'll go over to Mom's. We'll go over to my friend over here. He's still got money, right? Burn some bridges over here. I'll go over here. Sometimes we can relate to some of this stuff, and we don't think we can, right? Then his friend said, dude, you got to go. Then they moved in with his wife's parents. Things got worse. He woke up, it had to be stopped. He thought he was through forever. Now things are getting really bad. He's shaking violently in the morning, right? She's working at a department store. If he gets a few bucks in his pocket, does he go home to his wife? I'm sure we all do that. When we got a few bucks in our pocket, we went home to our family and said, here, I haven't been contributing. Take my money. No! He went to the bars and paid off his bills so he could buy more booze. We do these things, even then, right? He knew this had to be stopped. Then shortly later, he came home drunk. We talked about being cocky. You know, when we got like 30 days, 60 days, and, you know, I can walk down the aisle at the supermarket with the liquor store, you know. I got 30 days. I'm fine, right? And then he drank again. Then now he's getting the DTs. He doesn't want to step out in the middle of the street. He doesn't want to walk out in the morning because he's shaking so violently. He thinks he might get hit by a truck. Thoughts of suicide. He mentioned suicide. Swaying in front of the medicine cabinet and dragging his mattress to the floor so he wouldn't jump through the window. Finally, somebody came with a solution. Sedatives that would help him calm his nerves. That works, right? No, then he's drinking gin and sedative now, right? which landed him in the hospital where he met Dr. Silkworth. This is when he first met Dr. Silkworth. And we talked about self-knowledge. How many times do we go to detox for like 30 days and we go, ha-ha, I got this. Yeah. No, I don't need the program, the long-term thing. Just a detox. 1 week, I'm good. Self-knowledge, that's the answer. No, he ended up back. So anybody ever beats themselves up over doing this one more time in the beginning? Almost all our founders did. Okay? The frightful day came when he drank again, and his health was declining rapidly, and the doctor said he's either going to die, go wet brain, crazy, drooling on himself, not knowing his name, or locked up. He said, you didn't have to tell me, I knew, right? So this is where we ended then. Can you guys feel a little bit about what, if anybody can relate? That's what we're supposed to be doing here. No words can tell of the loneliness, this despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched out all around me. I'm sinking no matter which way I go. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Now, fear sobered me up for a bit. My heart stopped twice because of alcohol. Fear did not sober me up. But some it does. Then came the insidious day of that first drink on Armistice Day. What's Armistice Day? It's Veterans Day. It's November 11th. Bill's sober day is December 11th, so we're getting close there, right? Armistice Day, and I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. Oh, how dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch, my last drunk. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call a fourth dimension of existence. Like a slingshot. Hurled swiftly. Like a slingshot. Catapulted. The fourth dimension, remember, you ever go to a 3D movie, it's height, width, and depth, right? If you ask a scientist, he's going to say the fourth dimension is time. But here, I believe Bill was talking about spiritual. That fourth dimension, that spiritual healing, because we heal spiritually, right? I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. So near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. There was a certain satisfaction, I reflected. There was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dare hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. Anybody ever wake up in the middle of the night and where's the bottle? Not where's the car? Am I in the house? Where's the bottle? Do I have something? Right? My musing or my thinking, my pondering about what alcohol I had in the house was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. That was Ebby Thatcher. For those of you keeping track. Ebby was a member of the Oxford group. Okay? We read about some of that in our history in the foreword to the second. So Ebby had gotten sober and was told that the Oxford group believed that if you're a politician, you got to go help other politicians. If you're a doctor, you got to go help other doctors. A businessman, you got, right? If you're a drunk, go help drunks, right? So Ebby was told to go find a drunk, and he found his friend Bill and decided to go talk to him. The importance of carrying, he's learning the importance of carrying the message to somebody else, right? He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcohol insanity. I wondered how he escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I would drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought of only recapturing the spirit of other days. Anybody ever say, no, I'm not doing it right now? We either push them into it so we have, somebody out to hang out with, or we take one of these approaches. All right, more for me. Right? And that's what he said. Unmindful of the fact that his friend was sober, there was that time, and now he's recollecting, that we chartered an airplane to complete a jag, a run, an adventure. They were on an airplane. They landed in a field that was closed while a high school band, I think, was practicing on the field. They came out of the plane so drunk they landed on the tarmac on their face, and they thought the band was there for them. Right? So he's remembering all these adventures with his good old friend Ebby, right? Oh, his coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility or emptiness. The very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. The door opened. He stood there, fresh skin and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come on, what's all this about? I queried. I asked. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspect a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart. Let him rant, let him talk on and whatever he wants to talk about. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But just like we talked about in working with others, we don't preach. We don't point fingers, right? But he did no ranting. In a matter of fact, he told of two men had appeared in court, persuaded the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. One of those men is Roland Hazard, who we will read about in the next chapter, the one that went into Carl Jung, okay? The result was self-evident. It worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays, way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed, my grandfather's good-natured contempt for some church folk and their doings, his insistence that the spheres, or the angels, really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. He's thinking about his grandfather. Has anybody had, I hear it all the time, and you guys do too. Oh, I was raised this way, but not quite my... So we all kind of come in with that, all right? The next sentence, what does he say, though? Wait a minute. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. He thought about the tombstone that he bumped into. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered such things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means a blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher, like a black hole, and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested that vast laws and forces at work. Why does the earth not fall into the sun? I mean, I don't make that happen, right? There's something going on out there. Despite contrary indication, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay it all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. Yeah. I can't make a tree grow. I'll admit that. That's it. With the ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. Nothing like when we don't want to hear about the God thing and somebody tries to convince us of the God thing. We're like, oh my God, right? Now remember, he was in the wartime days. We fought in Europe over a lot of different beliefs, right? He says, to Christ I concede the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claim him. His moral teachings, most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. Kind of sounds like when they say, come to a meeting, take what you can, leave the rest. He's thinking about when he was back in fighting the wars, right? He says, the wars which had been fought, the burnings, the chicanery, the chaos, right? That religious disputes had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man, a grim jest, a joke. If there was a devil, he seemed to be the boss of the universe. He certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made a point-blank declaration. FYI, I will pronounce words wrong all the time. Okay. That God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from a scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that very minute, and that was none at all. That floored me. It began to look as though the religious people were right after all. There was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past, like when he recollected about his grandfather. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He had shouted great tidings. Good news. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. Kind of had a bounce in his step, right? His roots grasped new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. I don't like it. There still remained a little bit of this, right? The word God still arose a certain antipathy, dislike, bad taste in your mouth, right? When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as a creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway may be. I've since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. Just like in your second step, right? My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own concept of God? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy, intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered for many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. Like I said, Bill likes to talk. So there's this big icy mountain, and we're kind of up against it, freezing. It's dark. And he says that statement kind of melted that ice, and all of a sudden the sunlight hit him. Ooh, yeah, he did. He wrote very poetically. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Remember, because we lack that power. So there's got to be a power. You guys managed to get sober, right? Nothing more was required for me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. In We Agnostics, it says, are you now willing to believe? It doesn't say you have to figure it out, get the name, shake the hand, know who got it, right? It just says, are you willing to believe? You lack that power. There's a power bigger than you, that there's something out there that might be able to help return you to sanity, right? It's only a matter of being willing to believe there's something else. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. He thinks back to bumping into that tombstone again. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humbly willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon, how many people have been on a pink cloud? All of a sudden we go, sometimes we go like this, and then all of a sudden we go, oh my God, got to pay the rent, got to do this, got to get a job, got to do that, right? But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, like that monkey on the Ferris wheel in your head. Mostly those within myself, and so it had been ever since, how blind I had been. Now, this is December 11th, 1934, Bill's birthday. At the hospital, I was separated for alcohol for the last time. The treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens. If anybody listens to the tape from last week, I pronounce it tremors all the time. DT's is tremens, I was told. There, I humbly offered myself. Now, doesn't it sound like some of our steps in the next couple paragraphs? I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. I lacked that power. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my formed friend take them away, root and branch. Just like in the seventh step when we go, I'm willing, God, you can take away anything that's kind of keeping me, right? I have not had a drink since. My schoolmate visited me, Ebby, and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies, defects in character.
So did he not do the steps in order?
Okay, that's a question that's asked a lot. The question was, did Bill not do the steps in order at this point? This is December 11th, 1934. We haven't come up with the steps yet. So a lot of the things he gathered from his friend Ebby, from the books he's read, from his experience, from others, right? It was kind of like a combined effort. It's the magic and the serendipity, I believe, that when we did put this program together in the book, it was just all in the right time to give us what we needed. But he never says that he's the one that came up with it all on his own. We made a list of people I had hurt or to whom I felt resentment, like the 8th step. This is not a new one, right? If anybody's ever gone to confession, do 3 Hail Marys and you got to, I stole candy from my sister, okay, right? But we have to make things right? It's not new, but we're putting them together in a way that's going to work for us. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong, like in the 9th step. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to right all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my new thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would then become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me fit. We pause when agitated, right? Never was I to pray for myself except as my requests bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. My friend promised, when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain a new order of things were the essential requirements. Self-will run riot? Think about self-will run riot. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. Remember, self-will run riot doesn't mean we're just selfish. It means I'm full of fear, insecurity. I don't know if I can. I don't want to. What are you talking about? I want things this way. Let's look at you, right? Me trying to be the director. And I have to get out of self, relieve me of self so that I can, what you got for me, walk through what you put in front of me, right? So that's not easy. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals. But the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though a great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. The ice cube can melt slowly, or we can get it like, what, right? For a moment I was alarmed. Uh-oh. I called my friend the doctor, Dr. Silkworth, to ask if I were still sane. He listened and wondered as I talked. Finally, he shook his head, saying, something's gotten into you. I don't understand, but you better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were. The good doctor sees many men who have had such experience. He knows that they're real. Remember, Dr. Silkworth helped 40 to 50,000 alcoholics in his time after this. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works is dead. And how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice with others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. We have to not only do this deal, but we have to work with others. It's just the thing with us. If not, we walk around here going, right? That balloon pops sooner or later, right? My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates to remain skeptical for a year and a half, during which I had found little work. I was not too well at the time. I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. This is 6 months. He's the only one, right? Before he meets Bob. 6 months before he meets Bob. And he didn't have any work. We get in here 1 week sober and we're like, gotta find a job. Oh, right? Sometimes we don't. But anytime something's going on with me, if I just reach my hand out to somebody else, I can get through it, right? Many times I've gone to my own hospital in despair. On talking with a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It's a design for living that works in rough going. we commenced to make many fast friends, and fellowship has grown among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I've seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere, have seen the most impossible domestic home situations righted, feuds, bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one western city, we're talking about Cleveland now, and its environs around the area there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one might often see 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. There's a little star. So at the bottom of the page it says, in 2014, AA is composed of approximately 115,300 groups. As the book is put out until we print another one, they'll update those numbers. An alcoholic in his cups, those of us when we're drinking, right, is an unloving creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seemingly worldliness and levity. Ha, ha, ha. But just underneath, there is a deadly earnestness. We're pretty serious underneath it all. Faith has to work 24 hours a day, in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia, a perfect world. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friends, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill toward men. Yay.